Thank you, welcome. On behalf of KISA, I'd like to welcome all of you to this webinar. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our corporate members for their continued support. Without you, events like this will not be possible. If you ask me what would be my worst nightmare as an engineer working in healthcare, I would respond with a large-scale hospital fire. It's an absolute nightmare. I mean, everything that could go wrong in healthcare or in a hospital will go wrong in a fire. According to the National Fire Protection Agency in America, about 5,750 healthcare property fires were reported in the States over a 5-year period. With cooking equipment, the most common cause. However, electrical fires caused the most damage of them all. Closer to home, with the pandemic raging, we have seen numerous hospital fires exacerbated by the increased use of oxygen. We have seen an increase in high-profile hospital fires. A large part of Charlotte Makeke Hospital still remains closed from the April fires. Today, Heerden Fourie will take us through his company's experience with hospital fire. Heerden is working as a technical specialist at the private hospital group. He holds a BTech in electrical engineering and has 17 years experience in private hospital maintenance. He's currently the KISA Vice President and Secretary of the Western Cape branch. Just some housekeeping before I hand over to Heerden. The chat box is open. Please feel free to put questions in the Q&A box. I will read them out to Heerden at the end of his presentation. I'd like to thank IFMBE for letting us use the webinar Zoom platform. It really improves the quality of what we're presenting. Over to you, Heerden.
Thank you, Mohammed, and thank you for the opportunity to share the information. Just give me a second to set up. Can you see my screen? Can you all see?
Yes, I can see.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so the topic I'm covering today is quite a wide topic. I think I must warn you beforehand that it's not an academic paper based on extensive or intensive research, but more on my practical experience in fires we had in our group. And especially the devastating effects it has on our infrastructure, and then also some of the lessons learned from it. So just bear with me, just want to go to the next slide.
That's it.
All right, there we go. Thank you. In this presentation, I will start off by looking at the classification of fires, as well as the property of smoke, or more specifically soot. And then I will go through 5 practical examples of fires we've had in the group. And 3 of the examples has had minimal impact on our infrastructure, and with the last 2 fires we were not that lucky. And yeah, and maybe just take you through the various aspects of the fire. What I'm not going to cover in this presentation is evacuation plan, structural damage, and fire damage to infrastructure is quite a wide and intricate topic. So I'll be probably only scratching the surface, but I hope that the experiences shared will add value in the bigger scheme of things. So to start off with the basics, it's in order to start a fire, 3 elements need to be present in the right proportions. That's heat, your heat source, fuel source, and oxygen. In simple terms, when heat is applied to a material or fuel, it heats up until it gets to the flash point of that material, and then it will ignite when and if sufficient oxygen is present. If one of the elements is removed, the triangle collapse and the fire is extinguished. This principle is applied when you use fire extinguishers. For example, if you lower the temperature of the fuel by applying water to the fire, you will extinguish the fire, or if you deprive the fire of oxygen by applying CO2 or a foam barrier, or then also if you remove the fuel source and you starve the fire. Newer models published lately use a fire pyramid or a tetrahedron that with the 4th element being the subsequent exothermic chain reaction in the material. And due to this chemical chain reaction in the material, smoke and soot is formed, which in some cases cause more damage than the fire itself. When we look at the classification of fires, it differs from country to country, so it's country specific, but all of the models basically use the field type to classify the fires, with some subtle differences from country to country. In South Africa, according to our SABS standards, they distinguish between 5 types or classes of fire. Identifying the type of fire is important in order to determine what the most effective or suitable method of distinguishing the fire would be. Class A fires include all solid materials and usually contains compounds of carbon and include items like wood, rubber, coal, and plastics as typical fuel sources. These fires can be extinguished by using water, foam, dry powder, or chemical type, wet chemical type fire extinguishers. Type B fires includes all flammable liquids that include substances like liquids and liquefiable solids like petrol, paint, solvents, and alcohol, to name a few. Class B fires can be extinguished by the use of foam, dry powder, or CO2 fire extinguishers. Class C fires involve class A, B, or C combustible materials in the presence of an energized electrical circuit or equipment. For example, computers, medical equipment, electrical wiring, circuit breakers, etc. CO2 and dry powder type extinguishers are recommended for class C fires. One should be cognizant of the area in which the fire occurs. You don't want to damage sophisticated medical equipment by spraying it with or sensitive components of it with dry chemical power, or compromise the electrical supply to a subsection of the building by using the incorrect fire extinguisher. Class D fires in our world is not that common. It includes flammable materials like flammable metals like magnesium and sodium, and the dry chemical type fire extinguishers should be used for these fires. Then we jump from D to class F fires, which include cooking oils and fat used in typical kitchen applications like in our hospital kitchens. And I think, Mohammed, you've mentioned it in the statistics also that that is a contributor to a lot of fires in, not in the healthcare industry, but in the restaurant industries as well. The Class F fires or you extinguish Class F fires by applying a fire blanket over the flame, or treated by the wet type chemical fire extinguishers. Then I get to a very complex topic, and it's probably the part of the fire in my personal experience that caused the most damage. And luckily we didn't have any loss of life. I mean, that's worst case, but in terms of damage to infrastructure and equipment, the soot and smoke damage were actually quite more severe than the damage from the fire itself. And smoke and the resulting soot from the fire can cause a lot of damage in the hospital. The chemical composition of soot is mainly determined by factors like field type, the fire temperature, which is also influenced by the presence of oxygen, and some other factors. In severe cases of soot contamination, the soot can cause short circuits on printed circuit boards and electrical contacts. Soot contamination on PC boards can have a delayed effect, especially where it reacts with moisture in the air at the later stage to form hydrochloric acid, or there's other corrosive acids as well that can form on the printed circuit boards. These acids then damage the conductive tracts on the printed circuit boards, which lead to premature failure of the electronic equipment. Soot contamination can be very corrosive and can affect all building materials and various aspects in the building. The soot particles are also electrostatic in nature and is attracted to other electrostatic surfaces, which creates a problem on medical equipment as well. Then a second aspect that I just want to touch on before I get into some of the practical examples is the reaction time versus severity of the of the fires. And I think you've mentioned it also in the introduction that it's not a myth. It's not something that's happening to somebody else. It's a reality. I mean, it does happen. It does happen in our facility. It does happen in the government facilities. So it's a reality, and one need to be aware of the risk of fire. Emergency preparedness and staff training plays a crucial role in the fast and effective reaction time and that is crucial in limiting the damage that's caused by the fire. When a fire occurs in an occupied area, the chances are usually relatively good that the fire will be noticed timelessly and that effective action will be taken before the fire can escalate. However, where fire gets out of control, it's usually not due to one single cause, like somebody dropping a cigarette butt, or it's usually a combination of various factors, especially in unoccupied areas where the response time is not that fast. I've mentioned it in the following 5 examples. You will notice that in 3 of the examples, the impact was relatively low, and the damage was limited. And then in the last 2 examples, I will spend a little bit more time and go into more detail to give you a better insight on what the fire damage entailed in the two scenarios. So the first example is a simple example. It's the kitchen is one of the high risk areas of the hospital, and it also get a lot of attention from insurance service providers in terms of risk management. The focus is usually mainly on the deep frying cooking equipment, and with good reason. You've got a heat source and a good fuel supply, and and just need to add a human element and you can have a problem. However, interestingly enough, we found that in some cases, and in this specific example, it's actually not the deep frying unit that has given the problems, but it was more user error in terms of trying to use in an effort to use less cooking oil. They selected the pot that's too small, and from there it just went pear-shaped in terms of when the food were added, the oil started boiling, it spilled into the flames, and then the immediate reaction was panic and grabbing the closest fire extinguisher to the fire, which was not the correct type or class. It was CO2, which is to some extent can be dangerous in spreading the fuel of the fire. But luckily the fire was contained by another staff member applying the fire blanket over the fire and deprived it from oxygen, and the fire were extinguished without causing too much damage. And I think there's a lot of isolated incidences like this, which is not we don't see it in the newspapers, but that is all a potential big fire in the making if it is not addressed accordingly. Then the second example is about electrical reticulation, which you also mentioned in the introduction, Mohammed. And we found an interesting scenario and a big concern. In our medical locations 1 and 2 areas, power is supplied to the switch socket outlets from a medical isolation transformer, and the earth pin on the switch socket outlet is connected to a line isolation monitor. So if there's any leakage current between live 1 or live 2 and the earth pin, the isolation monitor will alarm. And so what we found with newer installations where the switch socket outlets uses a plastic base or yoke, it can actually pose a potential fire risk. When the liquid or saline in most cases gets spilled onto the pedestals next to the patient, and you get liquid ingress into the switch socket outlets, then you can get the scenario which we had in a couple of hospitals where the liquid between the two live pins basically reduces the isolation between the two pins. Current starts to flow, and it heats up, and it gets to a point where it starts to get really hot and burn. And the shortcoming in that scenario is that because the base plate or the yoke is made of plastic, there's no path for the current to the earth pin to give you alarm on the line isolation transformer, unless the liquid ingress happens between one of the live pins of the switch socket outlet and the earth pin. So in that case, you'll see the photo on the left where we actually had it heat up severely, and luckily it didn't cause a fire. But I mean, it's a great risk in terms of a fire risk and losing a part of your electrical reticulation that supplies equipment that is used on a patient. On the metal, the switch socket outlets with the metal base plate or the metal yoke, the metal between, or yeah, there's an earth connection on the metal plate that is bonded with the with the earth further down the line, and which feedbacks into the line isolation monitor. So if you get the same scenario with a switch socket outlet where with the metal yoke, then basically it provides a path, the metal provides a path for the current to the earth bin if there's a liquid spill, and it will alarm on the line isolation monitor. So it won't still not take away the risk, but at least it will give you an early warning so that you can act timeously and resolve the threat. I think on a side note here is to go on to what you also mentioned, Mohammed, was that currently the one of the preferred methods of treatment of COVID patients is high flow oxygen therapy, where flows of up to 80 liters per minute is achieved, and that increase the ambient oxygen presentation, and then also especially in the vicinity close to the patient mask, and that will definitely increase the risk in terms of a fire hazard if you got a switch socket outlet that starts to heat up and basically just waiting for oxygen and fuel to start a fire. Then the second example is the use of lithium-ion batteries in our facility. The lithium-ion batteries are quite popular in modern medical devices because of the high energy density. You get a lot of punch from a small package. Battery stability deteriorates with age, and battery management software is required to manage the batteries. The batteries is then spec'd to handle a specific number of charge and discharge cycles, and if you use it beyond that point, you have a risk of the battery overheating and igniting. In the photo to the right, there's a example of one of the monitors that actually ignited in one of our facilities, and it's a whole new mindset in terms of how we see batteries in non-critical applications. With the lead acid technology that we were used to, we were used to use batteries until it failed and you replace it depending on the application. And with the lithium-ion batteries, it's a different story. By keep on using it will still work, but you will increase your risk in terms of fire safety. And I think the other challenge that comes with the lithium-ion batteries is it's not like with the lead acid batteries that it's manufactured in bulk and that you can buy it from several suppliers. So you end up paying quite a premium for these batteries, and the temptation to keep them in use past their specified cycle is sometimes high, but I mean, one can't afford that risk. We can't take the risk. Then the first example of where we really had a major fire in one of our facilities. It was probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest fire that we experienced, and that was all started by a a faulty component in a light fitting. It was a magnetic ballast in the light fitting that overheated to such an extent that it melted the mounting brackets inside the light adapter. And it basically dropped onto the light screen and melted the light screen as well, and then dropped to the floor. And so in terms of risk, we have quite high quantities of these lights throughout the facilities. And in most cases, it does give you a warning sign when it starts to fail. Sometimes you pick up the burning odor, or you can hear the light humming or starts to flicker. And so sometimes there are some early warnings, and that usually gets picked up quickly in occupied areas. But the challenge is in unoccupied areas. It can actually be a time bomb waiting to go off. That is exactly what happened at one of our facilities. The light was in the theater pharmacy. So on the screen, you'll see the typical example of a typical theater pharmacy. If you just look at the position of the lights, the shelves, and all the fuel that is lying beneath that light, one can see what the outcome is going to be there. I think also worth to mention, it was shortly before Christmas, so it was in the holiday season, and theaters were not, the theater complex was not that busy, and it happened after hours. So by the time the smoke alarms and everything went off, the fire were actually already too far in process to stop it quickly. So this is images taken shortly after the fire. There you can see the shelves in the pharmacy severely burned, and also the damage to the building and the ceilings. In this specific case, it was actually just a theater pharmacy and one adjacent theater that actually burnt, the fire actually went through. And the adjacent theater was actually, it was only about a third of the theater were covered with flames. But the resulting soot of all those plastics burning basically took out a theaters for a period of a couple of months. If you have a look at this, is a photographs of equipment that was in storerooms. There you can see all the soot on the equipment, and on the photograph on the right, there's we opened one of the devices, and there you can see the soot residue on the printed circuit boards of the equipment. They basically the little green piece there's where somebody touched it. So so right away you can already know that soot damage will kick in there at some stage. And I think we all know the complexity of printed circuit boards these days, especially with surface mount components. So to clean the equipment, and especially sophisticated medical equipment, is not a achievable task. Here's some photographs of the electrical infrastructure as well as the air handling units. So there you can see the soot ingress in both of the in the plant and electrical reticulation as well. That had to be replaced as well. There's companies available that is doing disaster recovery and disaster management that actually specializes in cleaning soot contaminated devices. But I mean, in this case, if you look at the DB, it is a distribution board supplying an operating theatre with power. So, I mean, one can't take any chances there in terms of trying to clean it. And we had to replace the DBs as well as the air handling units. I've mentioned it a couple of times, soot is very corrosive. There is an example of an operating table, and you can see the rust marks on the stainless steel caused by the soot from the fire. The image on the right is a zoomed image of a surgical instrument, and you can see the pitting on the stainless steel or on the device, on the instrument, because of soot damage on the instrument. So how do we manage the risk? I think there's a couple of ideas. I think one of the added, or one of the aspects that reduced the risk from another angle was the fact that new energy efficient technologies became available, and from an energy efficiency perspective, there's a lot of initiatives going to replace old conventional fluorescent lights with magnetic ballasts to the electronic ballasts or the LED types. I think in terms of managing the risk, there's still a lot of old facilities, old buildings that still have a lot of these lights installed. So one have to do a risk assessment on these facilities to make sure or to identify potential risk areas and to address it accordingly. One method is just to go and replace all your oldest light fittings. Another method is to do infrared scanning, and I think one of the interesting facts that we picked up there was there was quite a number of not dry joints, almost say loose connections that in the light fittings that were actually showing a higher than normal thermal footprint, and so that you can address. And then is the installation of occupation centers in unoccupied areas to make sure that the lights are not energized when there's no people in the area. Sorry, just bear with me. Oh, there it switches. Then the next example is a hot topic in some circles, but it is the second biggest fire, or the biggest fire that I was personally involved with was started from a cigarette butt, and I think the important thing to realize is that it's not an isolated incident. There was a couple of smoking related fires in various facilities, and the main thing is if one keeps to the regulations and the rules, then the risk can be managed quite good and sufficiently. But once one go out of the regulations or not complying to the rules, then one opens oneself for trouble. So what happened at this specific hospital was people were smoking in a non-designated smoke area, or an area where no smoking is allowed. And usually, as with most of these incidents, it's not just one single incident. It's a addition of multiple factors that cause the problem. So what happened then was the cigarette butt was not disposed of in the ashtray part of the of the bin, but in the dustbin part of the bin. So what happened was the paper and fuel that was then basically thrown away in the bin ignited, and it heated to such extent that it was it ignited the plastic chair that was placed next to the bin. So then the plastic chair started to burn. It melted. It fell over, and on one of these tanks that were placed there when we had the day zero scare with the water shortage. That was part of the water contingency plan to get water from or between hospitals. So, and then one of these tanks ignited, and the result was basically these images that you probably saw on social media, or there were some videos doing the rounds as well. So if you look at the photograph on the right, you can see one of the tanks burning, and if you it's a little bit difficult to see because it was at night, but all the black smoke and soot generated from that fire. So there was the fire department busy extinguishing the fire. And that's another thing to consider in terms of your disaster management plans is that just like that, they are forcing 18,000 liters of water into your facility in effort to extinguish the fire. So there was the photo to the right is on it was taken the next morning, and there you can see the window on the left is the training department. The fire entered through that window into the training department, and then the photo on the ground floor on the right is the technical department storeroom. And then on the first floor, the two windows on the top is basically in the passage of the theater complex, where the fire didn't enter, but the soot entered the building there. So yeah, this is the training department from the inside. And if you have a look at the window there, the fire actually didn't penetrate the building more than 1 or 1.5 meters from the window. But if you look at the air conditioner here in the top middle of the picture, there you can see the mounting bracket of the data projector, and the heat was efficient to melt that bracket, and the projector landed on the floor. And the soot that came through that window then basically went through the building, and there you can see in an adjacent office in the picture on your right is the soot deposits on one of the desks. This is the technical department. So the photo on your left is the storeroom that burnt, and there also was a lot of fuel or plastics in and consumables in that storeroom that generated a lot of soot. The picture in the middle is the kitchen, and if you know the workshop at the hospital, it's on the other side of the workshop, and the door also facing in the opposite direction. And if you and just it's just mind-boggling to see the amount of soot in that kitchen. Then also, if you have a look at the TVs, yeah, there was also soot contamination in the TVs, but because it is feeding a technical department which is not critical, and the soot contamination was not that severe, they actually did use one of these recovery companies to clean some of the items, and on advice of the electricians, then basically they replaced some of the components. This is the passage on the hospital side of the technical department and training, and there you can see a good portion of the 18,000 liters on the floor, and you will also notice the soot damage on the walls, and the whole ceiling had to be ripped out, all the cable trays and cables cleaned, pipe drains and water pipes cleaned, and they had to repaint the ceiling void to get rid of the smell. On the photo on the right is services in the passage, power and IT equipment, which is also affected, which power is basically the same as I mentioned in the technical department. We cleaned, if it was for supplying a non-critical area, you can clean some of the components, replace the rest, with the yeah, and I'll get a bit later to the IT equipment. This is the endoscopy unit at the end of the passage, and when I first entered there, I thought that it escaped any damage from the fire, but upon close investigation, if you can see the photo on the right of one of the equipment pendants, you can see where I smeared my finger to, and there's the evidence on soot on the shelf. This is from the inside of the theater passage. So there you can see where the smoke and soot entered the passage. The photo on the right is when the restoration work was nearing completion of that same area. Yes, IT equipment, and for that matter, a lot of the medical equipment as well got a lot of cooling, or they got cooling fans, circulating air over the internal components. And if you look closely, you'll see the soot on the switches, and I mean, so we had to replace all the switches, and it is quite a process because you need to remove the switches, the cabling, clean all the cabling, make sure you don't contaminate the contacts of the cables while you do the cleaning, and then install the new switches. And in a hospital that's still operational, it's quite a challenge. Then the next step is to assess all the medical equipment in affected areas, and it's quite a daunting task because we as engineers are not fire specialists, and you know, it's on life support equipment, is if you make a mistake, it can have an impact on a person's life. So there you can see evidence of soot contamination in a ventilator. Then this picture is of the backplate. The photo on the left is of the backplate of an anesthetic machine. And at first glance, we thought it was contaminated with soot. If you look at the darkened speckles there on the panel, and at closer investigation, we found that it's actually dust from normal usage. And when we had a look at the anesthetic machine from the other theater where there was evidence of soot ingress, when we look at the filter, we could clearly see that it's dark material. And then an easy quick test to differentiate between soot and dust is granular and dry, and soot, if you rub it between your fingers, it's like an oily, sticky substance, which is difficult to clean off. But where does that leave us? I mean, you can't base decisions on sticky or feeling on your finger or not. You have to get some scientific proof. And some of these fire recovery specialists do have tests that they can do to see if there's soot contamination on the products. I think in addition to the fans, circulating fans drawing in the soot, there's also the fact that that soot is electric or electrostatic charged, also adds to the woes in terms of it sticking to the equipment. However, it can be cleaned, and then if the equipment is properly cleaned, you can open it up and see if there's any evidence of contamination inside the equipment itself. Then a very important aspect to remember is fire stopping and the protection of your fire zones. Is if you have a look at the pictures there to the left, that we all seen that, and in my rookie years, I at one stage also removed fire stopping from a wall without even realizing the potential danger that, or the potential risk that goes with it. And fire stopping is a science or an art on its own, and it needs to be managed very proactively or very closely, because if you compromise the fire stopping in one of your fire zones or your firewalls, then basically you go from just one compartment being destroyed by the fire to more than one, and possibly more. And if you also think of the type of equipment that we work with in a hospital, I mean, on your right is a picture of a biplane cath lab with penetrations through the slab to get the high voltage cables to the tubes. And if you need to replace those cables and you remove the fire stopping in that protrusion, then basically you are opening that unit up to risk should there be a fire in the unit in the area below the cath lab. Fire stopping, there's a whole standard and regulations to govern it. It must be done by a competent person, and I think with at the moment, with all the with information management explosion that we experience, there's a lot of network cables and going through our facilities, and we need to make sure that if fire stopping is removed, that it is reinstalled correctly and that it's managed correctly. Then last thing that we've picked up in the fire was that sometimes, you know, one tends in the training to focus on the different types of fires, the different types of fire extinguishers and the hose reels and fire blankets and other methods of extinguishing the fire gets neglected. And a simple thing like the nozzle on the end of the hose reel that can basically close the supply or adjust the spray. If a person doesn't know it, then they will think the hose reel doesn't work, and then you actually delay action to be taken to eliminate the fire. Another surprise that we've got was when the fire department arrived, the time was lost in searching for the correct key to open the fire hydrants. So it's advisable to have some of these keys at strategic areas in your facility to make sure that no time is wasted in getting the proper water supply going. Some of the administration and planning lessons learned from from the fire ordeal is an accurate asset register is a must. When you walk into a unit or into a hospital after a fire, and the pressure is really on to get the hospital going again, then one needs to know exactly what was where, and also then to manage the inventory of equipment if it needs to go off-site to be treated or whatever the case is just much more easier and much more controllable if you have an accurate asset register. A formal capital procurement plan definitely helps, especially when you engage with your insurance company in terms of replacement of assets and to get the hospital functional as quick as possible. If you have a good overview of what is going to happen in the near future in terms of your replacement plan, you can say, okay, but this section of the hospital is still okay for another 2-3 years, so let's rather use the funds allocated for that section to apply in the affected area, especially when emergency orders needs to be placed. And then very important, placement agreements and loan agreements of equipment not owned by the hospital must be in place. Otherwise, it won't be covered by insurance or by, and in the end, basically the owner of the equipment and the person or the hospital who loaned it is basically fighting over who is responsible for what. To conclude, no one is immune to a fire risk. It happens more than I think we would be comfortable with. Staff training and situational awareness is key in terms of minimizing the impact of a fire in a facility. And prevention is better than cure in this case as well. Training, awareness, and then also mitigating actions like replacing plastic switch socket outlets with metal yoke switch socket outlets, and maybe installing occupancy sensors will definitely reduce the risk in terms of having a big fire. And then also I need to reiterate the compliancy issue is rules and regulations are there to protect us and to make it safe for everyone. And we need to enforce that, and we need to install that in all visitors, all staff members, and everyone involved. Otherwise, if one moves outside of the framework, then that is where one enters the high risk areas in terms of fire. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to share this presentation with you. And I also want to make use of the opportunity to thank my employer, Mediclinic, to allow me to share the information with industry, and also some of my colleagues who assisted me in getting the content for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Heerden. Very, very interesting. Just a few questions, and I'm cognizant of time. We've got like 5 minutes left, so we can just rush through this. So I've answered 2 or 3 of them in the chat. So Mbai asked, how does one quickly determine the class of fire is raging to determine what extinguisher to use?
Well, I think that is basically going to depend on the area that you're in. Let's say in a kitchen, you know, you most probably will have either electrical fire or a gas or a class F type fire, and to have the required fire extinguishers available, and then also to know which one to pick in case which type of fire occurs.
I think training is so important, because
yeah, and I think yeah, to identify the various fires effectively. And there's usually also charts on or stickers on the fire extinguishers to indicate for which fires it is suitable to use.
Cool. Pete asked, during COVID-19 pandemic, a number of fires or explosions in ICUs were reported in the media. Has the causes of these fires been reported? I don't know if you noticed, but if I don't know if anyone in your group.
Mohammed, not that I'm aware of. To be honest, is fires outside my field of
Yes.
expertise and responsibility. I think that I got involved at this specific fire because there was a big component, medical equipment component to it. So not that I'm aware of, but it's not to say that it didn't happen.
Okay. Sakio asked, which standards classifies fire? Do you have the sense number in front of you? But I know there's numerous sense standards that refers to.
Yeah, no, I don't have it in front of me. I can offline maybe assist. I had a look at a lot of them in preparation for the presentation, but there's quite a number of them. There's a regulation for fire extinguishers. There's a regulation for the placement thereof. There's a classification of facilities, what kinds of fire extinguishers need to be used in which type of facilities. So there are quite a lot.
Okay. Well, thanks, Faniana. Our good friend from IFMB, Rosanna, asked, is risk management an explicit component of a health technology management plan in the hospital?
Yeah, I think I try and think what the short answer is. The way that our management structure is structured, it's not necessarily part of medical equipment management, but it is definitely a key focus in the overall risk management of the facility. So the biomedical engineer or the clinical technician will give their inputs in the bigger risk management process, but it's in the end, it's not the responsibility of the biomedical engineer.
Van Heerden, one question from me. I think that's all the questions in the chat. There is a big debate around putting sprinklers in hospitals. Some cities in South Africa require it. Many international standards require a building that has occupation, 24-hour occupations, to have a sprinkler system. Do you think a sprinkler system would have helped your situation here or made it worse? Yeah.
Yeah, Mohammed, how long is a string? I think a bit of both. I think if I think of the storeroom in the technical department, then sprinklers would have probably added value, a lot of value. But then again, a lot of the damage came from soot that that was a result from the fire outside the building, which would have not been covered by the sprinklers. So so I think, yeah, so maybe in terms of the localized fire in the technical department and maybe the training department, that would have added value. But in terms of the soot contamination in the rest of the facility, I don't think it would have had a huge impact.
Yeah, thank you. I see in the chat they say sprinklers may cause more damage. At least it will make your work a little easier. You almost guaranteed the equipment is gone. You don't have to try to assess or not. All right, that's on the light side. Thanks, Jan, for putting up the list of standards, SABS standards. That's quite a comprehensive list. Thank you. And yeah, for and for the other guys that have assisted in answering questions. The recording will be on the KISA's YouTube page. Kelleroy will upload it to IFMB, and then we'll copy it across to the KISA page. But yeah, I think we've run out of time. Thank you very much, Van Heerden. Thank you very much to Mediclinic for allowing Farina to share with us. I recall a similar fire like the lighting one at my previous employee some 14 years ago. And if we learned, or if everybody learned from it, maybe Mediclinic could have avoided this one. So it's lovely that you guys are willing to share. And thank you to our corporate sponsors. Any corporates out there that would like to get their logo up in our presentations and get some exposure to our KISA members, you can go onto our website, and we have a Gold Corporate Member link, and you can subscribe at quite a low cost for the amount of exposure you get. And thank you very much. And we see you all again next month. All the best.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.